We apologize for the interruptions. It's democracy at its best, and final days of this session, so it's going to be like that for a while. We have a lot of material to cover and many people to hear from during this hearing, so I ask that each witness strictly observe a 5-minute maximum for their opening statements. Your complete written statements will be submitted for the record. We will hear first from Monica Desai. I'm going to make sure that I'm pronouncing names correct here. I hate it when people call me Serrano.
Well, good morning, Chairman Serrano.
No, hold on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're Chief of the Media Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission. Then I will recognize Barbara Popovich, Executive Director of the Chicago Access Network, who is testifying on behalf of the Alliance for Community Media. The third witness to testify will be Howard Simons, a partner at the law firm of Mintz-Levin, who is testifying on behalf of the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. And finally, we will hear from Michael Maxnabi, Executive Director of BronxNet, well situated within that fabulous 16th Congressional District in the Bronx, New York. You're up first.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Serrano and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss public, educational, and governmental access to cable television. Promoting localism and diversity are two fundamental goals underlying the Commission's media policies. PEG access promotes both. The Commission recognizes the importance of PEG access in fostering choices for local and diverse programming in communities. Sections 611 and 621 of the Communications Act allow local franchising authorities to require cable operators to set aside channels for public, educational, or governmental use. PEG channels are permitted but not mandated by federal law. Rather, the decision to require the carriage of PEG channels is one Congress left solely to the LFA. The Commission's rules related to PEG access reflect the specific authority granted by the Communications Act. For example, Section 623 of the Communications Act requires cable systems to carry, on their basic services tier, any PEG channels required by the LFA. Section 76.901 of the Commission's rules defines the basic service tier as including, among other signals, any PEG programming required by an LFA. Under the Communications Act, LFAs may impose reasonable franchise obligations to support PEG. Under Section 611, an LFA may require that channel capacity be designated for PEG use, may require rules and procedures for the use of the PEG channels, and may enforce any franchise requirements regarding the providing or use of the channel capacity which relate to PEG. The Communications Act provides that the franchise fees paid by a cable operator for any given system may not exceed 5% of gross revenues. In Section 622, Congress specifically excluded from the term franchise fee any capital costs which are required by the franchise to be incurred by the cable operator for public, educational, or governmental access facilities. Accordingly, capital cost payments, such as facilities and equipment, are not subject to the 5% franchise fee cap, while non-capital costs, such as salaries and operating costs, by statute must be included in calculating the fee. The Communications Act permits LFAs to require adequate assurance that cable operators will provide adequate PEG access channel capacity, facilities, or financial support. The Commission has concluded that completely duplicative PEG and INET requirements imposed by the LFA pursuant to this authority would be unreasonable. The Commission also has found it would be unreasonable for an LFA to require a new entrant to provide PEG support in excess of the incumbent cable operator's obligations. The Commission has not adopted standardized terms for PEG channels, agreeing with LFAs that they are free to establish their own requirements for PEG as set forth in the Act. The Commission has continued to monitor cable franchising and especially the increased adoption of franchising laws at the state level. The Communications Act requires cable operators to offer local broadcast channels and PEG channels on the basic service tier. Under Section 623, the basic service tier must include PEG access programming required by the franchisee to be provided to subscribers. The Commission's regulations state that the basic service tier shall include at a minimum all local broadcast signals and any PEG programming required by the franchise to be carried on the basic tier. It has come to our attention that some programmers are moving PEG channels to a digital tier or are treating them as on-demand channels. We are concerned by these practices. We believe that placing PEG channels on any tier other than the basic service tier may be a violation of the statute. Subjecting consumers to additional burdens to watch their PEG channels defeats the purpose of the basic service tier. We believe it is important to ensure that consumers are able to get access equally to all channels belonging on the basic service tier, and that this should be the case regardless of what type of system the channels are being carried on. In conclusion, the Commission recognizes the importance of PEG programming. We will continue to enforce the statutory framework Congress enacted to allow adequate PEG support without overburdening cable operators and their customers. We look forward to working with the PEG community to address any challenges to PEG access. I look forward to answering your questions.